Welcome back to the Georgia Show. One of the big themes that we have been talking about at CDM and across the whole network is the protection of Christians and the freedom to worship where you want, and also the physical protection of them. There is a story breaking right before the show on CDM where an Armenian mayor, who was an opposition mayor, just won an election to the position against Pashinyan's party, the prime minister of Armenia. And if you remember, Pashinyan was in the White House recently with President Trump signing a peace deal with Azeri President Aliyev. Well, anyway, this Armenian murder happened today, where the mayor was gunned down right outside his house. So this has the whole country in shock, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the protection of Christians. I'll be in Beirut next month, but we were just in Armenia, and so you have, to set the stage, a serious opposition leader to the Pashinyan government in Armenia, murdered at his house. Obviously, a Christian man. We have a picture up on CDM, which I'll show in a minute, of his entire family, 5 beautiful children, and no father anymore. And Pashinyan has been going after the church in Armenia. We've talked about that. We've had Robert Amsterdam on. But I just wanted to break that. Bill just came out. I think we're going to talk more about this in the show, but what else do you have today?
So we're going to go back and we're going to talk about some of the announcements from Trump, both regarding the findings on autism and potential causes, and also some of the comments that he made during the UN. They're actually quite telling. But as usual, sometimes, the president has certain side comments that he makes and certain funny ways about bringing stuff up that I think may have more meaning than it appears on the surface. So we'll take a look at that. We will talk about some of the continued go back and forth between Tucker and Netanyahu, and now Dinesh D'Souza weighing in a bit on that to get people's comments. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the initial things that have come out of Tucker's special, which began airing on the 23rd, yesterday, regarding 9/11, and some of the questions that he is asking, which very frankly do overlap some of the questions we posed a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So we will see where that stands. We're not going to show the entire episode, of course, but we'll show a couple of clips to give people a sense of what's being talked about, and perhaps validating some of the things that we brought up. And we may have a couple more things hanging around by the end of the show as well.
You've always got more to put on the show, Bill. I know you have a long list every day, and we don't get through it all every time, but
we often don't.
You get fed a lot of information, as we do, and it's always difficult to curate it and put it in the right order and make sure people know exactly what they should know in our 60 minutes on the Georgia Show. I just want to throw up. I put this. This is the image of the mayor who was murdered with his family. Very sad day in Armenia. The whole country's in shock, I'm told by sources. And, this is another assassination of a leading Christian figure. And no one is talking about this except us. You won't find it on any other network, but we have the sources in country. I want to ask for your support. Please sign up for our no ad subscriptions, top right corner of any CDM site. You can sign up with no ads. We're getting a lot of response here. We appreciate it. And we need it to continue, because that helps us do the kind of reporting that we're so leading edge that it costs money to go and do this. And there's infrastructure costs, there's server costs, there's IT, there's security, legal, a lot of stuff we're dealing with, and your support would be very appreciated. So sign up for our no ad subscriptions, get access to all of our content with no advertisements across the entire CDM network. All right, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you, because I know you got a lot to talk about.
Okay, very good. Well, let's kick right off. So many people tuned in, and thank you for that, to our rebroadcast, simulcast, if you will, of RSBN's coverage of the president's presser regarding on Monday regarding the findings on autism and potentially some of the causes, and actually some of the potential treatment that might be applied to this. And so right away, it was very interesting. He was very notably focused on one particular finding, and that was that there seems to be a correlation. We're going to talk about this more deeply in a moment. A correlation between acetaminophen use during pregnancy and the incidence of autism in the offspring. Acetaminophen goes by several different brand names, one of which is Tylenol. And the president seemed to really, really focus on don't use Tylenol through much of the presser. Why he focused that way, we're not quite certain. But it was very interesting. And many people pushed back like they did here. Oh gosh, he couldn't even say the chemical name of it. He doesn't know what he's talking about and so forth. Well, as is always the case, we recommend people do their homework and check this stuff out. Go for the facts themselves. And so we did that. We went out and we're going to come back to the press conference itself in just a moment, but I wanted to immediately go to this notion of people saying, well, there's no finding that says there's any correlation between acetaminophen and autism. Well, here's what we found. We went to Grok, and you could go to other AI engines, but we went to Grok and we said, what is the finding, if any, on autism and the incidence of autism, along with the use of Tylenol or another brand of acetaminophen during pregnancy? And it was very interesting. It said the most comprehensive recent review published in 2025 identified 46 primary studies worldwide investigating this link, including associations with ASD, which is the autism spectrum disorder. It's a range of different disorders that are all deemed underneath the autism spectrum, if you will, and other neurodevelopmental disorders. Of those, 27 studies reported a significant positive correlation with autism spectrum disorder or related outcomes. 9 showed no significant association, and 4 indicated positive effects. And then they also go on to say that higher quality studies, those with better control groups, were more likely to find a correlation. Now, understand that a correlation means an overlap, if you will. It does not prove things like causation. So does this definitively prove that Tylenol or another brand of acetaminophen causes ASD? No, it doesn't. These studies don't show that. But the very fact that there's an overlap would be cause for concern in many parents, and so they deserve to know this. What struck me as interesting was they brought this out, and these studies have been around, many of them, for quite some time. And so one of the questions was, why would they bring these out now as if this was massively brand new findings? And I'll give you a couple examples. Here's a list of those, and they go all the way back, believe it or not, to 2014. And they come up, you can look at the various dates involved. And then for folks that say, well, there's really no evidence of any overlap here. Well, Mount Sinai actually supports a study, supports evidence that prenatal acetaminophen may be linked to increased risk of autism. Again, are we proving causality? No. But what struck me was the timing. And so one question is, what else was said during this presser? And was what else was said equally important? Perhaps. Well, let's take a look. As the presser went on, the president called on, I think, 6 other speakers and then 2 moms who had children with autism. But he brought up a couple subjects that I think had meaning, but that didn't specifically relate to the topic of the presser. Listen to this.
The Amish, yeah, virtually. I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say. But you have certain groups. The Amish, as an example, they have essentially no autism. First, effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good.
And he repeated that a number of times through the remainder of the presser. So, but what was interesting was that he brought up the Amish. Now, what do the Amish typically do in terms of medical preparations? They often have some of their own and often avoid some of the things that the greater populace might take advantage of. That doesn't mean they, for example, never get vaccines, but a substantial portion of them have a tendency not to. And so the president making a comment about the Amish having almost no, or perhaps he said no incidents of autism, I think is almost a hint. It's almost a signal that something's there that we need to pay attention to. In addition, later on in the presser, RFK actually did talk about vaccines, and let's hear what he had to say.
Continuing to investigate a multiplicity of potential causes with no areas of taboo. One area that we are closely examining, as the president mentioned, is vaccines. Some 40 to 70% of mothers who have children with autism believe that their child was injured by a vaccine. President Trump believes that we should be listening to these mothers instead of gaslighting and marginalizing them like prior administrations. Some of our friends like to say that we should believe all women. But some of these same people have been silencing and demonizing these mothers for 3 decades because research on the potential link between autism and vaccines has been actively suppressed in the past. It will take time for an honest look at this topic by scientists.
Okay, so listen carefully to what he said. He began by saying that they'd been looking at this for some time and continue to look at it. He talked about parents and mothers' opinions about vaccines and the potential that they may have harmed their children. But he also concluded or continued with his comments saying that it would take time to study this. So they really presented on his own no conclusions there. That I found very interesting. So they continued to look at this, but where many had assumed that this would be all about findings with regard to the vaccines, it in turn really was not. It was about findings with regard to acetaminophen, potentially, and its correlation to ASD.
You know, Bill, I have an antidote to that because I usually don't answer phone surveys, but I got one today, and the CDC came up, and I said, okay, I'll because I don't answer calls if I don't know who they're from or whatever, like cold calls. But so I answered it, and it was a survey, in-depth survey, about 15 minutes on my attitude toward vaccines. And I found that bizarre and a little bit worrisome, because why is the CDC checking up on the public's reaction to Trump's announcement?
How did you get on the list?
And yeah, exactly. So I found that quite interesting and a little disturbing.
I did, and it is very interesting. Let's go back here for just a minute. I want to show something else. So the key question is, what else was said and what did it mean? So those are the two scenes we just showed. Here's, again, we've shown this in the past. This is a picture of the incidence of autism in a series of years going all the way back to about 1970. And in 1970, the incidence was about 1 in 10,000. And currently, this chart stops, I believe, in 2022. We are being told that right now it's about 1 in 30. And in, I believe, California and young males, it's 1 in 12, I believe.
Yes.
So one of the questions is, well, is this simply, because this came up a lot in posts over the last 24 hours as well, is this simply we've expanded the definition of it, so we're finding more of them? Well, RFK in the presser pointed out that if that were true, and this study goes all the way back to it was actually occurring back in the 70s, however, at a much lower rate. If it were occurring as much as it is now, we would expect to see people in their 50s, perhaps 60s, that went back to living in the 70s and 80s that have autism and grew up with it and live with it now, but we don't. As a matter of fact, RFK pointed out that he knew of very few, if any, people of his age, he's a little bit older than I am, that have symptoms of autism. And so that would suggest that this is not just a definition of autism and spotting it more because we've broadened the definition. It's about that it is actually occurring more prevalently. One of the reasons, and I found it very interesting, I did a similar search on Grok looking for any studies that indicated a correlation between vaccine administration and autism. And it's very interesting. The answer was an almost unequivocal no. Had no studies with, and those that had showed no correlation at all. Yet even common sense suggests something to look at, and that is this. If we go back to 1962, for example, the average total number of doses of vaccine given to a child would be 5. In 83, it was 24. So approximately 5 times as many. And then in 2018, it was 72.
And people are much sicker and fatter and unhealthy.
Well, let's
And
go
they have
back to the
autism. Yeah.
let's go back to the previous chart. Look at the growth. So back in the 60s, 70s, 5. Then we get into the 80s, and we get into 24. Then we get into 2018. We're up here, further up the scale, and we're dealing with 12 times as many vaccine doses being administered. And we see this growth. Again, is that scientific? No, it's not, but it's almost just common sense. So it is very fascinating to find that there are no studies that provide any correlation between vaccine administration and autism, yet simple review of the data would suggest that there might be something there to concentrate more on.
Should be looked at, yeah.
So we will talk more about that, I'm sure, in the coming days. I know that we are due to speak with the head of Children's Health Defense, an organization founded by Robert F. Kennedy, and one that has looked into the notion of all types of environmental and chemical and medical factors that could affect children's health, and has done so for a number of years. So I think we'll have some interesting feedback following that conversation later in this week.
Yeah, Mary Holland will be there, and we're looking forward to speaking with her. She's a friend of the show, and it looks like we're going to be sponsoring a Children's Health Defense Conference in Austin, Texas in November to further that relationship with CHD. So
that's great. That's great. Okay, why don't we take a break, and then we'll come back and move on to the UN discussions.
We'll pay some bills. We'll be right back.
I'm excited to announce that we're having a huge sale on overstock and brand new products. For example, MyPillow Percale bed sheets, every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. Our Percale bed sheets are breathable, cool and crisp, and they're perfect for spring and summer. And check out Rev 7, the next generation of energy drinks. It tastes great, and it gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. Best of all, it's actually good for you. And for a limited time, try our 3-pack absolutely free. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs, or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes, only $29.88. Twin size, full size, queen size, king sizes, all $29.88. Inventory is extremely limited at this.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, a family-owned and operated investment advisory practice. I'm a certified portfolio manager, and my job is to help you make better decisions with your money. One of the things we try to avoid is investing in companies that push the woke agenda. If you're invested with one of the big firms out there, there's a pretty good chance that you're feeding the beast that hates your values. Our company is 100% conservative, and we'd love to have an opportunity to work with you. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big, proud American Eagle logo.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are two medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada.
Yeah.
You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
Okay, back to you, Bill.
All right. So many people know that when Trump went to the UN to speak, it was very, very interesting. He went to get on the escalator to go up to the second level along with Melania. They took one step onto the escalator, and that particular escalator then stopped. The other one next to it kept going, but that one stopped. Found it fascinating. They had to walk the rest of the way up. And then as he began to speak, he's looking at the teleprompter, and the teleprompter turns off. And so he's going to go back to his paper backup. And he made a comment about, what he got and didn't get from the UN. So were these attempts to mess him up, to sabotage his speech? Maybe. It kind of looked like it to many. Seemed very strange that the escalator of all things would stop, and especially the one that he had literally took one step on. He made a few very important comments, one of which was around climate. And we've gone back and forth for many years on the notion of climate change. And many will remember that the WEF and Bilderberg and all the different global organizations have continued, and the UN itself have continued to try to push forward a climate change focus and agenda. And he addressed that directly, along with several other things. I wanted to play this because I want people to hear this and think back to what we heard, for those of us who remember hearing about the devastating potential for climate change back when, perhaps if we go back into the 70s and 80s again, and yet here we are. So let's listen to this.
In America in 1982, the executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program predicted that by the year 2000, climate change would cause a global catastrophe. He said that it will be irreversible, as any nuclear holocaust would be. This is what they said at the United Nations. What happened? Here we are. Another UN official stated in 1989 that within a decade, entire nations could be wiped off the map by global warming. Not happening. It used to be global cooling. If you look back years ago in the 1920s and the 1930s, they said, global cooling will kill the world. We have to do something. Then they said global warming will kill the world, but then it started getting cooler, so now they could just call it climate change, because that way they can't miss. It's climate change, because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
The greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. Very, very interesting and unequivocal in his attitude about it. So one of the other subjects that he brought up is the subject of bioweapons and weapons in general, but specifically he brought up bioweapons. Let's listen to this.
To reduce the threat of dangerous weapons today, I'm also calling on every nation to join us in ending the development of biological weapons once and for all. And biological is terrible, and nuclear is even beyond, and we include nuclear in that. We want to have a cessation of the development of nuclear weapons. We know, and I get to view it all the time. Sir, would you like to see? And I look at weapons that are so powerful that we just can't ever use them. If we ever use them, the world literally might come to an end. There would be no United Nations to be talking about. There would be no nothing.
So that's a question that many people brought up in the past, perhaps 20 years. Why would we continue to develop even better, bigger, stronger nuclear weapons? We already have enough to destroy the planet several times over. Why would you need more? And why would you especially need bioweapons? Why would you use such a thing?
Good point.
For many years, people have struggled with this, thinking, well, this is something that it resides in a lab somewhere that we never hear about. Well, maybe that's not exactly true. Let's listen to RFK and Tucker discuss it in an interview that they conducted.
Victoria Nuland kind of blithely announced during congressional testimony last year that, oh, by the way, we have these biolabs in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that was kind of ignored, and the people who covered it got attacked for covering it. But the fact remains there are U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. Why would we have biolabs in Ukraine?
We have biolabs in Ukraine because we're developing bioweapons. And those bioweapons are using all kinds of new synthetic biology and CRISPR technology and genetic engineering techniques that were not available to previous generation. And they can make frightening stuff. What happened was, when we walked away from, when the Patriot Act reopened the bioweapons arms race in 2001, the Pentagon began putting a lot of money into bioweapons, but they were nervous at that time because if you violate the Geneva Convention, it's a hanging offense. And they weren't sure that provision in the Patriot Act would actually hold up as a loophole to treaties that had been ratified by Congress. So they were nervous about actually going full force into bioweapons.
So keep in mind, this notion of bioweapons has come up in context of Ukraine, and we're going to show that in just a minute. But it also came up in the context of Fauci and funding research into gain of function, meaning adding additional function to an existing biological agent. And he did this through an organization attached to one of the colleges up in North Carolina. And apparently also that research went all the way over to the Wuhan lab through a combination of funding and scientific contact that brought that information over. So did this actually result in what we dealt with in 2021, 22, and so forth? Well, we don't know fully yet, but it sure does look suspicious. Now, keep in mind, too, we're coming back to Ukraine. How come Ukraine keeps surfacing in all these discussions? And especially with a nefarious character like Victoria Nuland. And here is the comment that you just heard Tucker refer to, where she admits, we have biolabs in Ukraine.
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces.
Biological research.
Said very carefully.
Very carefully. And to prevent those materials from falling into Russian hands. So one question is, why would we have them? There were, I believe, if I recall the number, it was about 46 biolabs strewn around Ukraine. And if you recall, immediately following the beginnings of the conflict, the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine had a page where they talked about and gave links to many of the projects that supposedly were being done in these locations. Those links, those URL links to these locations were all broken immediately following the beginning of the conflict. And this was broken on a U.S. Embassy website.
Yeah.
So why would they intentionally break those links? And who did it? Why would it be done? And what was it they were afraid that somebody might find by looking into it?
Just real quick, we broke almost 10 years ago now that at least 6 or 7 years ago that on our Eastern European site that they were experimenting on Georgian and Ukrainian troops with these bioweapons. This is before COVID, and so there's something there, definitely.
Well, there have been reports that part of the research was mapping certain biological agents onto populations wherein they could find which agents were more effective at infecting certain populations. Is that possibly one of the things they were looking at? Possibly.
Yeah.
Do we have proof of that? Not definitively, but I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we do. Okay, so need to keep our eyes back on this notion of bioweapons and understand, unfortunately, that not only were we the potential target for some of this stuff, some factions of the U.S. government appeared to be funding and pushing this. Was it done through some of these other funny funding mechanisms that we've learned about because of Doge and other things? Possibly. We'll see.
Fascinating stuff. Good review of what's been going on.
All right. Do we want to take one more break, or should we press
Yeah,
on?
we'll take a quick break. Just pay a few more bills. We'll be right back.
I'm a naturopathic doctor. We are in the world of medicine very acquainted with many modalities, but probably the one most familiar with everybody would be two things: homeopathy and herbs, maybe some nutrients too, vitamins, minerals, that kind of thing. Now, we do know a lot about the drugs because we have to find out what drug you're taking affects you and what nutrient it depletes you of, because most every drug pharmacy product will deplete something. So we have been trained, and we have a database that we can check into that says this is going to take your B12 away. The pharmaceutical company cannot patent organic substances made by the body. You're not born short of Advil. You're not born short of Ritalin.
Yeah.
You can be born short of insulin, right? Mm-hmm. The answers to staying healthy and keeping away from even SARS or any of those things getting into you is staying healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You and I get sick because our terrain gets out of balance. Well, that's the same thing in the soil. You and I are made from this thing called dirt. And when we get out of balance, we have the same thing happen. Weeds start to grow in our body. Right? And that's what we want in our body. We want nutrients that we don't understand how to get well enough yet because our suppliers are lacking knowledge on nutrient density foods. So
this is what drove you to develop this, was your knowledge of this, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know that.
Okay, Bill, we're back at it. I just want to make what are you laughing
I was
at?
just listening to him. We're made out of soil, and the weeds start growing in our body, and I'm kind of like looking around for just trying to make sure I don't have some crabgrass somewhere.
I was thinking about what you said recently, and I think from a just bigger perspective, all of this has to be related. We have the UN, which is pushing stuff which is harmful to people. We have the destruction of Christianity, and what's the big commandment? Be fruitful and multiply. Mm-hmm. You have these weapons, you have energy reduction, everything to stop that commandment from happening. It seems like there's a much bigger agenda here that we may be understanding over time.
Well, the whole notion of people are now, they've put the depopulation word in their vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, well, who on the planet would be interested in depopulation? Some people make the argument, well, it's the elite because they want more of the planet to themselves. They don't need us for that many things. But, you have to ask yourself, gosh, what happens to people when they become elite? Do they just, do the notion of a million people getting harmed in some way, it just doesn't mean anything anymore? I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
Fascinating as it comes out.
So the next couple segments are going to focus around one of our favorites, Tucker Carlson. Now we've talked about the fact that on September 11th, he was due to release a 5-part series regarding some disclosures. And right from the get-go, he started calling the story that we have been given about 9/11 was false. Now, we didn't know in what respect he meant that, but we are beginning to get a sense of some of the things that they're focused on. He released this week on the 23rd, so yesterday, he began releasing publicly the individual episodes. If you join Tucker Carlson Network, you can actually see all 5 episodes as fast as you would like to see them, or you get to wait until they all come out. We were able to, with other people that had posted excerpts, we picked a couple of those because I wanted to give folks a sense of the kinds of questions he was asking, some of which overlap what we brought up 2 weeks ago. That's piece 1. Piece two, which we'll show first, there is a continuing dialogue, I'll call it, between Tucker Carlson saying certain things about Netanyahu, and then Netanyahu coming back and responding, in this case through an interview with Dinesh D'Souza. We're going to play them both and then may look at a couple other facts just to get a sense of, how does this relate to other things that we've seen that have actually played out. So let's listen to Tucker and then let's listen to Netanyahu.
He's running around. This is a fact. I'm not guessing about this because I talked to people he said it to. Is running around the Middle East, his region, and his own country and telling people point blank, just stating it, I control the United States. I control Donald Trump. He's saying that. And again, I'm not guessing at all. That's a fact. And I dare them to say that's not true because it is true and they know it's true. So I'm an American. How do you think it makes me feel? Even if I didn't vote for Trump, which I did vote, I campaigned for Trump. But even if it was Joe Biden, I'm an American. You can't it's too humiliating. I can't handle that. And I shouldn't have to put up with that. This is a country of 9 million people. I'm not even attacking the country. I'm attacking my leaders who are allowing my nation of 350 million people to be forced into doing things that are bad for me and my children because of some other country. Like, that is a violation of the most basic arrangement we have with our leaders, which is represent us, please, at least most of the time, and they're not. And there's an ongoing humiliation ritual designed to make us all crazy, designed to turn us into haters. I'm not gonna give them the satisfaction of becoming what they call me. I'm not a hater, and I'm never gonna become one.
Okay, so that was Tucker's position. Now let's go over to an interview that Dinesh D'Souza conducted with Bibi Netanyahu and hear what he has to say regarding this. And he calls out Tucker in the dialogue.
Exchange between Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz. Tucker Carlson said, "Are you saying that the Jews in Israel under Netanyahu are the descendants of the ancient Israelites who are described in the Bible?"
Of course. There's no question about it. The Jews spread from this land to various parts of Europe, to the Middle East and elsewhere. But we never forgot this land. We said, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. My great-grandfather came here in the 19th century. Most of the Palestinians who are alive today came after him. So that's what our history has been. On the one hand, regaining our ancient ancestral homeland. On the other, developing a state that becomes a juggernaut of technology and development. We're Silicon Valley in the Middle East, a democratic society in the face of enormous attacks of countries that want to annihilate us every day. Who is Tucker Carlson defending here? These are people who chant, "Death to America." They're after you. They want to destroy Western civilization. They want to destroy everything that America stands for. They say Israel is a small Satan. The big Satan is America. The only place where Christians are safe in the Middle East is in Israel. Not tolerated, welcomed. They participate in our society. We take care of the holy places, which are destroyed everywhere else. Churches blown up throughout the Middle East. So
listen to what Netanyahu just said. they're protected. Churches are blown up elsewhere, but they're cared for. Christians are welcome in Israel. We hope that's true. One of the questions that we had was what have we seen in previous months with regard to the safety of Christians and churches in Israel and specifically in Gaza. Well, you'll recall that there is a location known as, and bear with me for a moment here. It's one of the churches in Gaza, and it is a Catholic church that Palestinian Catholics go to. Here's a picture of it, and unfortunately, it was bombed, and it was bombed by representatives of the Israeli government, apparently. And there's part of the front after the bombing occurred. There's a picture from the side. So you see the facade was damaged, but the damage was very extensive inside, and 3 people were killed. How could that have happened? Was it a mistake? Well, that's what was claimed. It was just an error. A tank, I believe it was a tank, is the last report that I was able to find, fired on the church in error. So, it begs the question at the very least, is there more to this? We don't know, but it is something that needs to be explored over time, and we need to keep an eye on what is actually going on. We'll see. We will see. So that's that portion of the Tucker Carlson, we'll call it segment, if you will. The other one is, what is he actually now bringing out, and what questions is he posing in these reports on 9/11? I'm going to play, this is a little bit of a lengthy segment. It's about 7 minutes, but I'd like to play this because he begins to give you a sense of the kind of questions that he is forming based on information that they uncovered during the construction of these 5 episodes.
Foreign governments may have had foreknowledge of 9/11, but the Israeli government stands out in particular. And here's why. On the morning of 9/11, a group of 5 Israeli nationals purported to have witnessed the initial explosion of the World Trade Center and were seen to be celebrating the event. At the time, the celebrations received quite a bit of mainstream media coverage.
Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S., who may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th.
It's striking to see operatives from a supposedly allied country celebrating the mass murder of Americans. But it is true that some in Israel saw the attack as a good thing for them. A September 12, 2001 article in the New York Times quotes now Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding to the 9/11 attacks. Quote, "It is very good," before adding, well, not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy. Netanyahu predicted that the attack would strengthen the bond between our two peoples because we've experienced terror over so many decades, but the United States has now experienced a massive hemorrhaging of terror. According to FBI documents, the Israelis caught celebrating the 9/11 attacks had videotaped the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and may have possessed foreknowledge of the same. When the Israelis were arrested in New Jersey, they were carrying box cutters, multiple passports, thousands of dollars in cash, and photos of themselves smiling with the World Trade Center burning in the background.
The Israelis are always for the Israelis first, last, always. They don't like the United States, except for the most part, our money. And yet, our National Security Agency is producing information for them, but not shareable with its own people. Go figure.
According to FBI records, polygraph tests administered by the FBI suggested that they did not have foreknowledge of the attacks, but did engage in deception and were likely involved in illegal foreign counterintelligence. They were spying in the United States. The leader of the group, a man called Dominic Suter, fled to Israel on or around September 14th, 2001, immediately, and he was later included on an FBI anti-terror watch list distributed to European allies in May of 2002. Most of the Israelis were held in FBI detention for 2.5 months before they were deported for visa violations, a common way to expel foreign intel assets from allied countries.
The Israelis pride themselves on having infiltrated every Arab intelligence service, every terrorist group, Did the Israelis know about 9/11 and not tell us?
One memorandum submitted to the 9/11 Commission presented substantial evidence suggesting that numerous art students from Israel, who were in fact Israeli intel assets, had been strategically located across the United States. It's hard not to notice that they lived near the future 9/11 hijackers.
There were groups of Israelis traveling around the country as artists, sketching things. Happened to be one time around Cape Canaveral, I remember, and other places where there were certainly things to paint and sketch, but also noticeably near military installations or some other kind of installation in the government. So I think that's an open question yet.
The so-called Israeli art students centered their operations in Hollywood, Florida, and northern New Jersey. Those are the exact locations of the hijackers before the attack. According to the memorandum, quote, "It is very difficult to believe, based on the existing evidence and the location of their common central operating bases, that this group was not tracking the future hijackers and their collaborators as well." According to The Forward, a Jewish publication, quote, "The Israeli government acknowledged the operation and apologized for not coordinating it with Washington." Within a week of the attack, Israeli intelligence officials claimed they warned the United States about large-scale terror attacks on highly visible targets in the United States. But those specifics of those warnings have never been made public. There's no evidence they happened.
In fact, in the whole time I worked in counterterrorism from 92 till 2004, I never saw one piece of information from the Israelis that was really worth anything.
So I'll stop. Excuse me. I'll stop it there. That gentleman that you saw speaking with white hair and white beard, excuse me, was the head of a desk constructed by the CIA to track operatives within and associated with Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. And so he had quite a bit of knowledge leading up to 9/11 and many of the studies that were being done around Al-Qaeda. Oh, excuse me, Todd.
No worries.
So we will, we recommend folks, if they haven't yet, go to Tucker Carlson or go to Tucker Carlson channel on X. Watch these episodes as they come out, and I think you'll be fascinated by the information that they're focusing on. They do talk about some of the anomalies with regard to lack of plane wreckage in both the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania, and some of the other things that we brought up a couple of weeks ago. So they've done what looks like a wonderful job, and we very much respect Tucker and his team for putting the work together. So with that, I guess we're ready. I think you had a piece that you wanted to cover with Chris Gleason that you'd done some work on.
I didn't get it ready. Let me take another break, and then we'll play that when we get back. We'll be
Okay,
right back.
great.
To celebrate our newest launch, Rev 7, I'm bringing you an amazing introductory offer, plus an exclusive overstock sale that you're not going to want to miss. Rev 7 is our premium energy drink that tastes great and gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. That's because there's no sugar and no caffeine. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7 that for a limited time you can try our 3-pack absolutely free. Or check out our Percale bed sheets. I can't believe I'm even going to say this. Every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes only $29.88, even the queens and kings. Inventory is extremely limited, so order now.
Well, we're back, and I'm going to play this from Chris Gleason. We have a story up on the Manhattan.press, which is our New York paper, talking about a sim farm that was located and absconded by the Secret Service recently during Trump's speech. And it had 100,000 cell phone numbers, which they said could be used to shut down comms networks with DDoS attacks. But Chris Gleason has another, take on that. So I'm going to bring this up, and you'll hear what he has to say. And now we're going to bring in Chris Gleason, who is my guy that knows everything. Chris, how you doing, man?
All right. How are you?
I'm okay. So let me just throw this up here. We had this yesterday. It's on the Manhattan.press, where there is a SIM farm outside of New York City that was shut down, which may compromise comms networks. And I thought of this. I know you have a lot of experience in this area. What say you about this story?
Well, it's something that we know has been going on for quite a while. Their use or their intended use of it for the disruption of cellular networks and emergency responders it's an interesting position to take. I think that that we're not always getting the whole story, right?
You
and
think?
in particular, yeah, I think so. I do, however, believe more that this has something to do with foreign influence and forward operations with regards to sock puppet accounts, and that's
really?
that's my take on it. You know, I mean, I'm not gonna come out here and tell you that a 30-06 round from 200 yards away is not going to leave an exit wound, right? Or
You mean
that
the spine of steel is not true?
the spine, I would have to say that the spine of steel, you know, I go with what is presented to me, and somewhere in there is maybe some truth. And so that I think that we're in that same realm here. You know,
this is funny because I know some people in Eastern Europe, and when Russia shut down Telegram or tried to, the Kremlin shut down a lot of IP addresses, and they're very good at comedy. Is my point. They laugh at the people in power now because it's so comical. But they tried to shut down Telegram, and there was a comment on social media. Well, Telegram still works, but the pole that lets me out of my parking lot every morning, the Schlagbaum they call it, like a gate, that doesn't work anymore. So, I mean, it's just comical, right? The spine of steel, the altered text messages. But
so coincidentally, right? This whole thing, there are protections built in for this stuff, and one of those things is called FirstNet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And FirstNet, just so happens to run our elections.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So how would
wonder-
a SIM farm, like multiple different? I mean, what is it? It's a lot of different cellular accounts. Is that?
Yeah. So if they were running 100,000 SIM cards, that's essentially 100,000 users, and they can you can certainly do DDoS attacks. You can do quite a bit. However, I'm more inclined to believe that this is more an influence operation and a psyop. But
And how would
when
that
I say
work, Chris? How would that work?
so, you would have these sock puppet accounts, and this is very well documented types of operations. As a matter of fact, General Stanley McChrystal oversaw a lot of this during the Iraq and Afghanistan war, right? Where they had what was called psyops. Now, when I say psyops, I mean CY ops.
Right.
Okay. And so it's a combination of cyber and psychological operations, particularly tied to manufacturing consent or building a consensus of opinion on social media. And we certainly know that has been happening quite a bit.
So how would that work though? Like they would need a cell phone number to like verify an account or something?
Yeah. You would have that. So each, these farms would effectuate users, okay? And all automated. Each phone is a particular identity. And in some cases, depending on how robust their operation is, you could potentially have multiple users on multiple devices. And, in today's day of AI, you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, we do a lot of stuff as far as being able to automate processes. And I mean, this is certainly a way that manufactures consent or tries to shut down viewpoints that they don't want. There's a guy by the name of Scott Pressler who has a whole army of these things that whenever you criticize them, they go on the attack. And, this type of a network could be used for propagating particular sentiment on certain issues that are evolving in the news cycle. Another use for this type of a network would be for campaign finance contributions.
So, I'm just trying to think this through, like how that would work. You would just have a fake accounts coming in and then just flood the internet with information. Is that what you think?
Yeah, and or interaction with a certain narrative to to suppress certain viewpoints or to promote certain viewpoints.
So the Secret Service would know if they're doing that. If they found these numbers, they would know what's been going on with this server farm, right? Sim farm.
Yeah. I mean, all of it, can be tracked. I mean, there's a big data center in Utah that houses every 1 and 0 of all the digital communications in the country.
Yeah.
So they know what's going on. Hopefully the right actions are going to be taken, because I mean, so if Secret Service was involved, obviously that was probably geared. Well, there's two vectors there, right? One, presidential protection, but two, monetary. Because a lot of people don't realize, Secret Service isn't just about protecting the president; it's also about protecting currency.
I'm going to stop it there, just because it goes a little bit longer. But anyway, it was an interesting take that Chris had on the whole sim farm.
It was. I was very, encouraged to see you guys indulge in, some conspiracy theory there. Who says a 30-06 won't blow somebody's neck completely away?
The spine of steel. I mean, it's just pretty. It's pretty bad, man.
There's so many pieces here that are just bizarre.
And we reported today that Candace Owens came out on her podcast recently and said that she has eyewitness testimony that the guy on the roof was not in jeans and the shirt, but was in tactical camo gear.
Yeah.
That the rifle was not a 30-06. It was something much lighter and more tactical and more military grade. So, and that's from an eyewitness. So I guess she talked to the guy.
We will see, but we do not have the full story yet. That is absolutely certain. And,
very true.
It's fascinating. So that's an interesting capper to today's show. There's always more to learn, and we are always here to try to figure out what it is we need to learn. So we'll have more next time as more comes out.
I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. on the Skiff, 10 to noon, Monday through Friday Eastern. So please join us tomorrow. We'll have some great guests as usual. Thanks for all the participation and spreading the word on all the shows. And check out the Colorado show today. It's a different show. It's kind of funny, more geared to a younger audience, but they have a good time over there. So check that out. The Colorado.
They're smart folks. They're smart folks.
Smart. Yeah. Back to you, Bill.
All right. Very good. We will see you guys next time.